A voice spoke to me as a child. At 26, I am finally starting to understand that an event that happened when I was 6 years old may be the reason for my persistent depression since. This is going to be a long one, so I apologize. If someone wants to skip it, go right ahead. I was born into a very religious family, so much so that my first word was amen. I was a very happy baby, and even into my first 5 years I was gentle and kind. I don't remember much from those years except that I was happy. To this day, those years are my only reference for true happiness. One day, I was playing outside and I swear to you, I heard people singing. We lived in the country with no other houses around, so it wasn't neighbors. My dad had told me that every time someone accepts Jesus into their heart, the angels sing. I thought it was angels singing, so I perked up and addressed them. I was only 6 years old, so I don't remember exactly how it went, but I ended up having a conversation with the voices, which became one distinct voice. I could hear it clearly, although it was soft and airy. Almost like a distant whisper. Keep in mind, I was around no one else. The voice told me that it was my guardian angel and it would be with me all the years of my life. I talked with the voice and asked it questions, although I can't remember what I asked. Finally, the voice told me its name. It told me to call on that name whenever I needed it. But then it said I could never ever tell anyone what its name was or it would leave me. I agreed I would not tell what the name was and it went away. I felt comforted by my conversation with the voice and I ran inside and told my mom what happened. She must have thought I was being a silly kid and then I told her how I had to promise the voice I would never tell anyone its name. My mom was concerned by that, I'm sure, but she didn't press me for it. Time passed, maybe a year or two, and I didn't speak of the name. I repeated it myself over and over again so I wouldn't forget it. I remember being scared that if I forgot the name, I couldn't call on it for protection. After some time had passed, I had learned how to write, so I took a corner from a journal and wrote down the voice's name. I wasn't sure how to spell it, so I wrote Beelzebul. Since I had the conversation with the voice, my life had changed, slowly at first, then more. I could not feel fully happy. I would tell my mom that I felt like a shadow followed me. I explained to her that it wasn't a literal shadow, it wasn't a person or thing, it was a feeling. It sucked the energy and happiness out of me. It's hard to describe, but I felt that the feeling followed me everywhere. More years passed. I was probably 13 to 14 years old at this time. I no longer believed in God and was actively turned off from religion. One day, I was talking with my mom about that day when I talked with the voice. She asked me what the voice's name was, and because I didn't believe in it anymore, I had sort of forgotten it. I told her I had written it in my journal. I keep everything I write, so I found it pretty easily. When I showed her, her face made this sick expression. She told me that Beelzebul was too close to Beelzebul, another name for the devil. We didn't talk about it again. Since then, I have struggled with depression, bouts of suicidal thoughts, a preoccupation with the darker side of life and death, substance abuse, and the shadow continues to pollute any happiness I try to find. I am not religious, so I don't think I need to be prayed over or given an exorcism, but traditional medicine hasn't really worked for me either. I don't really have a specific question, but if anyone has a similar experience, or maybe an explanation, I am all ears. Mom hears voices. When my mom was a young girl, She used to be very close to her grandmother, who used to live in Mexico. As my mother grew older, she was even closer to her grandmother. One day, her grandmother started to get very ill, and somehow my mother expected the worst. When she recalled being in her home in Mexico while her grandmother was in the hospital, she and her mother were sitting in the porch where she heard the strangest voices. My mom recalled hearing many voices, what sounded like they were praying, like the sound of a big group in a Catholic church. She had told my grandma about it, what she was hearing, but my grandma thought that she was crazy. But then again, my grandma realized that her mother sometimes could also hear voices like people praying and such, but she didn't want to scare my mom by telling her. Well, as soon as my mom heard those voices, not long after that, her grandmother had died. After that day, my mom had been given a gift she believes was handed down by her grandmother. Every time my mom hears voices, she knows something is about to happen. She can't say what or is not sure. No, she does not hear them all the time, and she's not schizophrenic. My mom is always by herself at home during the day because my brother and I are at work, and she usually says nothing out of the strange happens. Just the other day, she said she was in her bedroom and she heard many voices speaking. But before that, she said she heard a long train that sounded like it was in a subway station. Before the voices, she said it sounded like a train stopping, and she began to hear many voices in the distance. She could not decipher what they were saying, but she said she found it to be a very odd experience. She said this has happened to her twice in our home. She described to tell my grandmother, who was shocked that my aunt-in-law happened to be there. She actually mentioned to hear the same thing as her, but only once. She described the train as going fast, like it was on a journey. She said it finally stopped, that it had a screeching noise like they do when they suddenly come to a stop. She said she was trying to hear what they were saying, but all the voices were in the long distance, and she said they sounded like they were coming from the room next to her. Has anything like this happened to any of you? Calling my name in my daughter's voice. This all started about 3 years ago. I was at home with one of my friends. We were talking and laughing. We both heard my daughter's voice shout down from her bedroom. "Mom, be quiet, I'm trying to get to sleep." We both said, "Oh, sorry, Jade," and started to talk a bit quieter. After a few minutes, we both heard it again shout, "Mom, I'm trying to go to sleep." Again, we both said sorry. A few minutes later, my mobile phone rang. It was my daughter ringing me to say that she was spending the night at her boyfriend's house. Me and my friend went upstairs to her room, only to find it empty. A couple weeks after this happened, my daughter begged me to swap bedrooms with her, but would not give me any reason as to why she wanted to move rooms. She said that the room frightened her. I have never told her what me and my friend experienced, as I knew it would terrify her. A year or so later, I moved houses to a bungalow. My boyfriend and I were lying in bed one morning with the bedroom door pushed. We both heard my daughter talking. I didn't think she was home, so I shouted her and got no reply. I went through the living room and her bedroom, but she was not there. Then a few days later, we heard my daughter and my son's voice chatting away. My son was at his home about 18 miles away, and my daughter was in town shopping. We have since heard my daughter shout "Mom" on several occasions when she has not ever been in the same house. I have messaged numerous mediums, etc., to find out why this is happening, but have never received a reply. They probably think I'm some kind of weirdo, but I assure you that 2 different people have been present when this has happened. I am not frightened by it. I am just confused as to what this all means.